Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Krisha Tapia, and I'm a research fellow at the Matilda Centre for Research in Mental Health and Substance Use located at the University of Sydney. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's Cracks in the Ice webinar, and I'm very excited to introduce you to our speakers for today. To begin, however, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of Australia and recognise the continuing connection to land, water and culture. I'm currently on the lands of the Darug and Guringai peoples and pay my respect to their elders, past and present. I further acknowledge the traditional owners of the country on which you are on and pay respects to their elders, past and present. And I'd also like to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues who are joining us today. So today's presentation is one in a series of webinars, which is running as part of the Cracks in the Ice project. If you've already seen the website, I'd encourage you, if you haven't already seen the website, I would encourage you to visit cracksintheice.org.au, and we welcome any comments or questions you may have, so please feel free to get in touch with us at any time. Before I introduce you to today's excellent speakers, I wanted to let you know that as participants, you're in listen-only mode, and this means that we can't see or hear you. However, you will notice that we have a Q&A button on your dashboard, and this is where you can type in questions that you have throughout the webinar and send them through to us. And then we'll have a question and answer portion at the end of our webinar. I'd also like to let you know that we will be recording the session today, and we'll make this recording as well as the slides available to you through the Cracks in the Ice website. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today, Danielle and ADARRN. So starting with ADARRN, he's the program manager for the Glen Centre. The Glen is an Aboriginal Community Controlled organisation that's located on the Central Coast of New South Wales. And Danielle has over 10 years experience across a variety of facets within education, including student engagement, program development and accreditation to build access for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. Danielle's current role at UTS as lecturer involves curriculum design and development to embed Indigenous graduate attributes into the learning and professional development of the Faculty of Health students and staff. And this includes community consultations and collaboration. So thank you both for joining us today. We're extremely lucky to have you with us, and I'm sure this is going to be an interesting session. I will now hand it over to you, Danielle.
Great, thank you. I guess the most important thing is that I'm also the chair of the Aboriginal Drug and Alcohol Residential Rehabilitation Network, which is a network of many Aboriginal community controlled drug and alcohol rehabs in Australia, one of which is the Glen. I work quite closely with the Glen for men and the Glen for women as well, and privileged to work with ADARRN here. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. So I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're Zooming from. So ADARRN and I are both Zooming from Darkinjung country, and we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present and the people that especially ADARRN's working with who are on their healing journey, connecting with culture, connecting with country. And ADARRN will talk more about that, I'm sure. So I guess who is ADARRN? We kind of lurk in the shadows a little bit. So I'd like to just show you a short video from the website, you can access on the website, about who ADARRN is and what we try and achieve.
ADARRN is the Aboriginal Drug and Alcohol Residential Rehabilitation Network, which consists of residential rehabs all around Australia. There's members from Northern Territory, Queensland and New South Wales at the moment. The ADARRN network shares knowledge between members through joint meetings, secondments, staff exchanges, and various workshops.
The service we do is 24 hours. It's not just 1 or 2 hours a day. It's a 24-hour job that I find, and I could call if I need support or I need advice. I could go to the rest of the members, find out what I need to know. They're pretty good with that.
We were feeling a little bit frustrated that locally we didn't have other Aboriginal resi rehabs that we could connect with and share our challenges, share our highlights, and just another organisation that understands what we are going through. And it actually came about Googling, and I come across ADARRN, reached out, and it was exactly what we needed for our organisation.
So it's definitely helping. It's helping us be able to come together to support each other, to share our knowledge, share our culture, and share the holistic and spiritual, cultural aspect of what does work for drug and alcohol rehabilitation.
At present, we've just received a small increase in funding from the New South Wales government, which we're very appreciative of. And it's enabled us to have a person to focus on going around the rehabs to ensure that a quality service is being received by the residents in those rehabs.
ADARRN is perfect for us because we are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander rehab, and that is the focus of ADARRN, and supporting other rehabs with the daily functioning, the policies, the procedures, the frameworks, guidelines, all of that stuff, funding. So it's been extremely helpful for us because it's quite niche in what they help with.
Well, I tend to feel I don't want to lose focus of what I want to do, and that is to help. Well, for me, it's always help our people.
People's lives can become so superficial and about the wrong things, importance put on the wrong things. And for me, being a member of ADARRN and working in the Gumbi Rockhampton organisation, I have really got to see what is important in life and what matters and what comes first.
I guess running and operating rehabs can be complex and at times stressful. Having a network of like-minded CEOs, managers, workers, and other organisations gives you a bit of support to deal with those similar situations.
ADARRN is definitely something that will support and guide a lot of services, as all services cannot be the same. To be able to all share the same knowledge and same model of care, it's definitely something that's important to have.
It's just being part of that one body. Like those rehabs that are all doing the same job. We've got that support there with ADARRN. And in the 12 months I've been there, I've seen the improvements. I've seen how they've grown. So, and we can only grow, continue growing.
So I think also it's probably timely to mention ADARRN works predominantly with Aboriginal Community Controlled rehabs, but we also sometimes advise and consult with non-Indigenous rehabs. And I think given that it's Reconciliation Week, it's good to note that Indigenous leadership can work for everybody, and ADARRN's a great example of that. And I think Aaron will probably speak about this a little bit later, how some rehabs are not exclusive for Aboriginal clients. And so again, modelling how our ways of healing and our approaches to healing can actually benefit all peoples, especially given that it's Reconciliation Week. Uh-oh. I don't know what, there we go. So we've kind of covered who ADARRN is. It's a network of Aboriginal Community Controlled rehabs. And then our logo is another important element of who we are. So the logo was designed by an ex-client of one of the rehabs. And so in and of itself, it represents the work that we do and staying true to really building up the people that we work with. And the blue represents the colours of the oceans and the waterways from the coast and the coastal fish that come from the oceans. And the red represents the red from Mother Earth, the inland Australia, the muddy water fish. The centre of the logo represents a yarning circle where Aboriginal peoples have done business for tens of thousands of years. And no one is better than anyone. It's always an equal level playing field where everybody has the right to speak and everyone has the right to be listened to. And the fish represent the philosophy that a school of fish, not dish, can survive and flourish better than an individual fish.
Yeah, if they end up on the dish, they're not doing too well, right? I think it's also important to note that with that logo, Danny, is that you notice the fish are all swimming the same direction, right?
Yeah, stronger together. And so who are the current members of ADARRN? So we've got most Aboriginal community controlled resi rehabs in New South Wales. We also have 3 in the Northern Territory, 2 in Queensland and 2 in South Australia. ADARRN is not federally funded. We get some funding from New South Wales Health. So majority of the work that we do is volunteer work that we kind of give up our time to go to other rehabs and undertake workforce development and those sorts of things. And so we haven't had really, I guess, the resourcing to grow too much. So most of our growth has actually just been through word of mouth and people like Gumby that we saw in the video, Googling and just needing some extra support. And so that's how we've kind of grown organically through that process. So today we're going to talk to you about the model of care. So the ADARRN model of care demonstrates a community of practice entrenched in Aboriginal ways of working. There are 9 elements in the model of care, and the model of care has quadrants which kind of form a holistic approach to empower clients across a whole spectrum of recovery elements. The model of care was developed through extensive community consultation. So it was consultation with staff at the various rehabs, clients, families, community members, ex-clients about what they wanted to see or what they felt was important in the model of care. Most of it were things that were occurring within the rehabs. And the network wanted to formalise it in a model of care that could be reported to and really clear and crisp. So instead of all doing different things, we created the model of care, which brought everybody together and everybody's working under the same model. So it includes the 9 elements, but it's an overarching model. It's not specific. It's not concerned with everyday internal program elements, timetabling, specific cultural practices, or things that a rehab needs to be doing. A rehab needs to be flexible to its own community and the local context. So it's just their overarching principles that can be applied and changed and adapted to make sure that they're responsive to their local context and the community's needs within that environment. So we had the first model of care, model of care 1.0, which was in around 2020 it was launched. And so you can see the 9 elements there. Culture is at the core of healing, culturally safe and appropriate, holistic, strengths-based, trauma-informed, person-centered approaches, flexible healing and therapeutic options, evidence-based approaches, skilled and diverse workforce, partnerships and collaboration, and evaluation and continuous quality improvement. And then last year, the beginning of last year, or 2022, we undertook an evaluation, and the beginning of 2023, we published that evaluation. And what we found is culture was really at the core of healing, and it was foundational to all the elements. So it needed to move into the center as opposed to being one of the 9 elements, because culture intersected with everything. The way that people spoke to each other, the way that people were greeted, how you undertake therapy, all of those things. There was some sort of cultural elements that were really hard for people to articulate, but that nonetheless they were there. And so we moved culture to the middle to be at the core of the model. The other thing we did was we added the EMU track, so you can see that it goes both ways now. It's not just one way, because you can start the model of care, you can start working on any element, and it doesn't matter where, there's no prescriptive one way or the other way. The other thing that we changed was strengths-based, healing informed and trauma aware, because we found that the rehabs were really focused on healing, aware of the trauma and addressing the trauma, but really focused on the healing and the journey of recovery. And the other thing we changed was skilled, diverse and supported workforce. There's a huge increase in peer workers and workers with lived experience. And in the Aboriginal Community Controlled space, there's obviously a lot of work or staff that are Aboriginal. And so that there's a lot of layers. In the last couple of years, we've seen more layers of experiences of racism for Aboriginal peoples all over Australia. And then you add on to that Aboriginal peoples in recovery. And so there needs to be some really clear support. And so, so we added that into our model of care to always be reminded that, no matter who your staff is or where they're from, that it's a tough gig and a tough place to work. Sometimes great, but some days can be hard, and that support is really important. And so we'll go through the elements one by one, and Aaron will share some on the ground so I can talk to the I guess theory and the researchy bits behind it, and the process of evaluation and how we came to where we landed. But what does it look like day to day in a rehab? So, which is the good bit, I think. So culture at the core of healing. Aaron, can you give us an example?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's pretty good that we've got a visual there, actually. You can see that with the dancers down there to the right, if you can see your screen. We do have a yarning circle, which is where the day starts every morning. Anyone who's familiar with our culture is that, the significance of a yarning circle is that we're all on the same level, facing each other, sitting in a circle, obviously. And everyone has a fair share of the time to speak and a voice, and everyone is listened to and understood. Like Danielle said, we've got a majority of lived experience workers, such as myself, who actually went through the program. And culture tells us that our learning is done through experience rather than writing, and books and classrooms, right? We're out in nature, out with our people, and out with the various, our elders are people in our program. The elders in our programs are people that have been through the program, so to speak, and have come out the other side and are doing well in life. So the yarning circle is a really important space for us. We've hosted so many different guests and people from all over the country, prime ministers, football players, actors, musicians, but the most important person is the person who arrives on day one, because they're at the most vulnerable. They finally ask for help. And my experience was an experience of most of the men that come through our men's service is that you finally realise you're not alone. Back to you, Danny.
Next one, only for a second. So culturally aware and culturally appropriate service. So we can't separate clients from the community. We can't separate clients from family. Yes, they're in most cases in a 12-week program that is geographically, I guess, away from their family and sometimes community, but the rehabs often try to work with the local community, so attend events and things, and have opportunities for clients to connect with their family, whether it be phone calls or family days or events. Aaron, you can probably talk a bit more to that as well.
Yeah, so more on what Danny said. Obviously, from what's on the screen there, family and kinship ties. We don't believe or have high fences, gates, barbed wire, security passes in our services. People can leave if they decide to do so. We connect people with community all the way through their journey within our services, because keeping them hidden away and in a bubble is actually detrimental to their healing. So after, a couple of weeks of kind of settling in, we engage them within various community activities out and about for us here on the Central Coast and in Sydney and in the Hunter, New England area, and get people out and about participating in all kinds of community events, family days and stuff that Danielle mentioned. We do them on site and invite families in, but we also actually go out into the community as well and do things like waterways cleanups. We do environmental cleanups. We assist the elderly with moving houses and changing locations, people that are in housing need. We go and do cleanups of apartment blocks. We get involved through our cultural dance and our dancing program. We go out and perform at various community events in schools. We do drug and alcohol talks in schools and seminars and things like that as well. And as it says down the bottom, we separate our men's and women's service to have our men's business and our women's business as well. So the women are out doing similar things related to their business, and we do stuff related to the men. Occasionally we collaborate because community is collaborative, right? Occasionally we collaborate for certain events, but yeah, our healing's done on different sites.
And then number 3 is holistic, strengths-based, healing informed and trauma aware. And so sometimes, well, most of the time when clients come in on their first day, like Aaron said, at their most vulnerable, there's been a long history of making poor choices, doing the wrong thing, getting in trouble, and really feeling disappointed in themselves. So the strengths-based healing and recognizing a person's self-worth, and sometimes it's somebody else recognizing the skills and values and things you have to offer that starts to help you rebuild and recognize that in yourself. So always coming from a strengths-based, promoting self-reliance, participation, and control. So especially, again, Aaron can speak to this, but people coming from prison, there's not a lot of autonomy. You don't get to make a lot of decisions for yourself, but coming into rehab, you have to make decisions for yourself because when you leave the rehab, there's nobody there to make those decisions for you. And so in a rehab, it's important to be making sure that the clients are developing those skills to be able to stay in recovery when they do go into their communities, and they might be faced with some tough decisions that they have to make, that they're strong in themselves to make those decisions that are best for them.
Yeah, so further on that, I guess, with the mental, physical, environmental, social and spiritual dimensions to life, further on what Danny said, our program each week and our routine is developed under this ADARRN model of care. So we on each day we kind of touch every part of those 5 aspects there. Obviously with the morning group, we start in the morning, we engage with local psychologists, CBT therapists, and personal trainers, and as I said, we get involved in environmental stuff. We utilize the environment. We're lucky, despite the fact that we're on the Central Coast and land is valuable. We do have quite a bit of acreage, so we utilize the land we're on for those kind of conversations with people, those difficult conversations around childhood, generational and grief and trauma. And then with the social and spiritual dimensions, as I said, with the social, we do get out and about, put people into situations and out in community where they're given trust, they're given responsibility, they're representing us. We really take that attitude of the Glen for men and the Glen for women. We have a saying, once a Glen boy, always a Glen boy, and people feel that responsibility. Like we've created like a mob. It's like our mob here, and everybody's really feels embraced and safe around their mob, but they also feel like they have a responsibility to provide to the mob, right? Because Indigenous men, for tens of thousands of years, we were providers, and we really base everything we do on that. The resilience and strength-based approaches will obviously through tackling that multi-generational and childhood and trauma and neglect and things like that. And then the self-reliance, I mean, a prime example is there's a fellow who was here a couple of years ago, and we use a video of him, and one of the best ways, I guess, if as anyone to describe it, is he came from prison. He had a long criminal history, and within 2 days, a worker handed him the keys and said, "Can you take, you know, Johnny Smith down to the hospital?" And he was like, "What? You actually trust me with this car?" You know, and I've been here for 2 days. So he was given a sense of responsibility, and that job of getting someone to an appointment for a healthcare need. You know, he was responsible for that person's well-being, and he remembers he felt that immediately, you know. So things like that are a kind of not only promoting self-reliance, but also, you know, reliance on your community and providing for that community as well.
The other thing that I forgot to mention in this area is that sometimes the substance use is the symptom of the problem and not actually the problem itself. And so by working holistically, you're addressing so many underlying things that might actually be why people are turning to drugs and alcohol, because they want to numb their memory or experience or physical pain. And so by working across the whole dimensions, you're really treating the whole person, or working with the whole person, not just that one element that, even though that's kind of what they've come for, to really address that, you have to address everything else. And that leads into the next one, which is person-centered approaches with a family and community. Like I said before, we're Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's a collective. We're family people, we're community people. We don't kind of function by ourselves in a room and get better by ourselves in a room. We get better in a community where, and I love how the Glen often says they love the clients back to recovery or back to life. And that's really that person-centered care within this whole family and community framework.
Yeah, and exactly, you know, furthermore on that, you know, what Danny said about, you know, that the symptom of substance misuse and abuse is that, you know, we've found that, you know, there's inquiries into ICE and these summits and drugs and everything, but it's an actual epidemic of neglect, grief and trauma. You know, that's what the epidemic is, and the substance abuse is but a condition of all of that stuff that's come to a head. And we found a lot with our men, like every single one of our men who come through the program, when they kind of realize that that's a symptom, and then we dive into that stuff that's behind the symptom, you know, that's when it can become, you know, it says, as it says there, it's really complex. It's not like that old language around addiction is, oh, he's an addict, he's an alcoholic. And it kind of then boxes us in. But when we kind of remove those symptomatic, you know, issues, we realize that it's a lot more complex behind the scenes and behind each person. And so that's why we have those flexible harm minimization approaches, because, you know, like mobs and like stories, you know, if you go to a different mob, they might only be 100, 200 Ks away, but they got a different story about how to heal a certain thing. They use different plants, they use different medicines on how to heal something, right? But it's still the same condition, but there's a different way to heal it, right? Some mobs heal it by dancing and culture, and other people use bush medicines, and other people eat certain foods, and other people use certain waterways to heal things, you know? So we have to be really flexible in our approaches as well, especially since culture is at the core of our healing, you know? The individual needs and preferences, beliefs and values are obviously taken into account, because, you know, we're so used to be putting in boxes, you know, since colonialism, you know, we've been put into areas, we've been put into, you know, everyone, you know, all cultures throughout the world have been segregated and said, okay, well, that's you over there, that's where you're from, that's who you are. But we all know through Aboriginal culture, there are thousands of mobs in Australia with, you know, hundreds of languages that we know, like the ones that we know, and we don't know the ones that we lost. There's potentially way more, you know. So we understand and we take that into consideration. And that's not just with our Indigenous clients, it's also with our non-Indigenous clients, because with the culture being at the core of the healing, we know here and we believe here and we share here that our culture prior to colonialism was never exclusive. It was always inclusive. It became exclusive once it started to be, you know, manipulated and toyed with from the outside, but it always has been inclusive. So we're really inclusive, especially of our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters. And we believe that, you know, Danny mentioned about Reconciliation Week, like the best way to get in and experience something is to get in and experience it, right? Not to stand on the outside and point. And so we get everyone involved in everything we do here, and including offering where, you know, culturally okay, we offer those healing techniques for non-Indigenous brothers and sisters as well.
I think the other thing that's important on this one is also the, I guess, the experience of family and community when a person is in addiction. Like a family often, there's a lot of strain on family and relationships because a person is in addiction and they're thinking about their addiction, and sometimes you know, they might take that out on their family members, especially those closest to them in various different ways. So there's a lot of harm in those relationships that also needs repairing and fixing, and so or to be worked on. And so by including family and community in the healing process, it gives them an opportunity to heal as well through whatever they've experienced while their loved one has been in addiction, because seeing somebody that you love in addiction is hard in and of itself. And then you know, the experiences that you might have has you know, a huge effect on the relationship between the person in addiction and the family member. So again, it can't be in isolation, and a person can't just go off in recovery and go into recovery and then expect everything to be fine when they get out if they haven't done the work to rebuild that relationship. And so that's part of that process to get on the journey to do the work. And sometimes, you know, it takes a much longer than 12 weeks, but it's starting that process and recognizing that's part of healing, and it's important.
I think it's also important to note that, you know, from that photo that was on the last slide, you saw, if you saw it, you saw the boys on the beach there where they'd written in the sand, Glen boys. Like the culture and the connection that we've created here is that people have come from such a isolated, shameful existence, you know, and they walk out like actually proud to be a Glen boy or a Glen girl, like so much so that they're writing it on the beach and they're getting photos. They put it on their social media. It's like an acknowledgement of, hey, I've made mistakes, but now I'm here and I'm, you know, doing my best to change what's happened. And, you know, not just for myself, like it talked about the journey of oneself, but as Danny mentioned, to change that kind of generational change, you know, generational change for their families, for their communities, for our people.
And so the next one is flexible therapeutic options. And Aaron kind of spoke to that a little bit in the last one as well. But we can't expect the same thing to work for everybody. You know, we're all different in all different ways. And so you need to offer clients a range of opportunities and options and see what they like. And sometimes, and I've seen this time and time again, when people say, no, I only want to do this. I don't like sport. I don't want to do any physical activity. And then part of the program at the Glen is you just have to give it a go. You might not love it, but just give it a go. And then people surprise themselves because they didn't know, they thought they were a certain way, and then it turned out that they're a different way. There was a client a few years ago now, and they were so sure that they didn't like group, they didn't like the circle. They didn't want to talk in the group. They just wanted to do one-on-one therapy because they were embarrassed and then they did the one-on-one therapy and hated it because all the focus was on them, and they were like, you know, so that in itself made them feel uncomfortable, and they much preferred the group setting because then other people would validate their feelings and had maybe similar experiences, and so it wasn't as focused on them. But that person would never have known that if they didn't give both a try. And the amount of, especially at the Glen for Women, the amount of women who refuse to participate in the sports kind of elements and the physical elements, and then 2 or 3 weeks later they're running up and down the driveway doing their daily run, is so surprising, because it's just a whole change in their mindset by giving things a go and realizing that they can actually enjoy different things and enjoy things without using substances. So things like going to the football, or seeing music, live music, all of those things can be enjoyed without alcohol or drugs, but you don't know until you start to experience them and realize that, hey, this is actually pretty fun. I can remember it all. I've not done anything stupid.
We take the boys to a lot of NRL games. Being an Aboriginal men's rehab, we're all based on the Central Coast. Everyone's got a team that they follow, and we've collaborated with a lot of the NRL teams and in Sydney and Newcastle, and they get us tickets to games. And so often when I take the guys to the games, do I hear that, like, some guys that are 40, 50, 60 years old say, I haven't been to a rugby league game sober in like 40 years, or since I was a child. And it's like it brings back that childlike innocence to enjoying the game, enjoying the company, enjoying watching the players, weave their magic on the field. And like Danny said, actually remembering the score and who won. And it's really great to see that, childlike smile and childlike innocence come back to them when they're in those positions, because sporting events, as we know, especially in Australia, and alcohol and gambling, is just all kind of mixed up, where you can't see where one starts and the other ends these days, So it's really good to kind of experience, sitting with these fellas and watching them just be like kids again and enjoy it with that, innocent eyes. It's really cool to experience that.
And so the next element is evidence-based approaches. So there are some things like the cultural elements where there's not a huge Western evidence base. We know it works because we've seen it work time and time again for over 65,000 years. But there's very few publications and stats on it. But it's about, again, reconciliation and using the best from both. So, the Glen has been around for 30 years this year. There's a heap of expertise and wisdom in the organisation as it is, that is drawn on, that might not be in peer-reviewed publications or statistics. And then couple that with the cultural knowledge that the elders and community members and clients bring to the program. And then on top of that, the peer-reviewed publications and statistics and programs that do have that evidence base. So bringing all of those things together to try and make sure there's the most comprehensive best practice program that's always evolving and improving to be able to offer the clients. And that's across the board. So comprehensive assessment for intake and case management, reviewing clients, and clinical interventions that across the board.
And we understand, obviously, with the ongoing need for data and evidence and stuff like that, but there's, a big thing at the Glen is when people contact us for that evidence, the first thing we do is say, come here and look and speak to the people, Don't take our word for it. We all know data and evidence can be manipulated and turned into whatever you want it to be. And, we always, our first point of call is, invite people down to stand here, stand on this ground, feel it, speak to the brothers that are here at the men's and hear their experience, of what's happened for them in the short or long time that they've been here.
And number 7 is skilled, diverse and supported workforce. So a collection of experience. So I guess a bit of an expertise matrix to make sure that there's loads of different expertise and personalities and people within the workforce. It would be boring and probably not very effective if everybody was exactly the same. But by having people that complement each other, you have such a broader spectrum of expertise and skills, and also personalities for clients. You know, there's always clients that get along potentially with one staff member over another, and that's just people. You know, we're not all going to be best, you know, get along exactly the same, but by having a diversity of people, you're creating an environment where people feel safe and they think, oh, I'm going to go to ADARRN because I want this done today and I know he'll get it done, or I'm going to go to one of the other staff members because I know they'll give me a sympathetic ear and let me pour out my soul. You know what I mean? You kind of use, as a client, you know who you're going to go to for whatever your needs are at that particular time.
You summarised that pretty well, because that's exactly what happens at the Glen for Men.
If you need a reality check, you go back to ADARRN.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's important, and you know, not one staff member can be everything to everyone. You need to have different skills, and that's what makes the organisation really function really well. And to have colleagues that are different to you, so you can see things in a different perspective, because somebody can point something out that you didn't notice before. So it's really important to have that skilled and diverse workforce that are supported. So a number of the rehabs within the network have cultural supervision and clinical supervision, where there's people to talk to and debrief, and especially the clinical supervision is often I don't want to say mandated, but strongly recommended to happen quite regularly, and funded and resourced by the rehabs to make sure that the staff do have someone to talk to that's not their colleague, or it's going to compromise them in any way. They can speak openly and freely about whatever it is that they want to get off their chest for that time.
Yeah, it's important. It's, you know, it connects in with that saying, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. You know, it's the same kind of thing. It takes a village to heal people. You know, we do have, as Danny mentioned, you know, everyone's got their strengths here, and it appeals to certain Glen boys, and other things don't appeal to them. So they know where they need to go for whatever need that needs to be met, and it's all available. Speaking of the qualifications and skills and experience, yes, we do have a diverse workforce, mainly Indigenous workers here at the Men, but we also have non-Indigenous workers and external stakeholders and service providers as well, to have that wraparound effect on everybody for that approach. But I tell you what, I might need to work on my qualifications. You hear that intro of Danny? Went on for like 10 minutes. Mine was just like, oh, here's ADARRN from the Glen. I'll have to, yeah, you'll have to help me out there, Danny. Your intro went for like 20 minutes.
Oh, I was hoping to fly under the radar.
Thanks to you, thanks to the university team. Appreciate that.
The other thing that we didn't mention before, which I just remembered, and it's particularly here in the skilled and diverse workforce, is the ability to put things into the program. So if a staff member is particularly, I guess, enthusiastic about something, then they could potentially build that into the program, and same for a client. If a client is particularly enthusiastic about something, they could build that into the program. So some of the Glen for Men staff are really into marathons, and so they started a running group, and so the men go for, I definitely don't participate in anything to do with a running group or a marathon, but they you know, do regular training, and they can earn a special running shirt if they participate. And I remember there was a client a few years ago who was really into diving, and would go diving for lobster and stuff every so often. So you'd go there and there'd be a big lobster. You know, so it gives you a passion to go to work, because you kind of get to put into your work things that you like to do as well, and share that with your colleagues and clients. And then as clients, it allows you to share a skill or a passion that you have, again, with other clients, which is part of that healing and that building your own confidence.
And with that, you know, that again, like we said, it's always wrapped in culture, you know, culturally, you know, for thousands of years, that's what we did. Like, you know, everyone had their place in their community and they provided that service to that community, be a hunter, be a gatherer, be an artifact maker, you know, be a knowledge sharer. You know, it's the same thing. We encourage, as Danny mentioned, you know, the clients, a lot of the fellas here will come in, they've had a skill set or something. So even in our purposeful life skills, we maintain the property here. We maintain it ourselves. We don't get any external contractors or anything like that. We do it ourselves. So someone may have come in who may be a qualified carpenter. So we will set him up with somebody on a carpentry project, a younger fellow or someone who's keen or has never worked a day in his life but would like to learn some carpentry skills. We set them up and tee them up together so they can share that knowledge with each other, you know, and guide them through it. So it's not only with activities and events, but it's also in, you know, employment skills and resume writing, and you know, some of the guys don't know how to, have never operated a phone or had an email address. So someone who's really cool, you know, one of the younger boys now, it's all the younger guys that know how to set up, you know, social media accounts and email accounts and attach things to emails and everything. Like, they'll sit with one of the older guys and show them how to set up their phone properly, insert the SIM and do everything. So it's really based on that knowledge and experience sharing again.
So I'm just going to quickly go through these last two so we can have a bit of time for questions. So another, at the Glen particularly, you know, staffing at rehabs, especially the Glen is not so bad because it's near the beach and it's in quite a nice location, not too far from Sydney, but some of the other rehabs out in Moree or Brewarrina or Rockhampton, staffing is a little bit more difficult. And so the partnerships and collaborative service networks are really important because that's what keeps the rehabs running. The reliance is not solely on the staff. And so it, one, reduces the burden on the staff. It allows the staff to have those relationships with the clients without having to do everything for the clients. It helps the clients develop relationships that are outside the rehab. So when they leave the rehab, they can still go to their counsellor, or they can still, they know the person at Centrelink who will help them sort it out, or they know they know one of the people at the TAFE that can help them get into another course because they really enjoyed the first one. They're not always constantly having to go back to their rehab to say, oh, can you help me with this, or can you tee that up, because they've got their own relationships within the community, within the service providers. And it also helps the rehabs with staffing because it reduces the burden on staff, so you're not required to have as many people, I guess, doing as many things because the workload can be solely case management and referring out to get things done. And again, it's that skilled and diverse workforce. You're using people's expertise. If you work at Centrelink and you do that every day, your knowledge of Centrelink and forms and processes is much stronger than one of the case managers who, you know, has a different problem for each different client and doesn't understand, you know, has to work out what form has to fill in with what thing. So it just makes sense to use the expertise of people and build the relationships. And then the last one is evaluation and continuous improvement. So, you know, like with Tracy said in the video, when we started, most people that work in Aboriginal community controlled rehabs want to see clients healing. They want to see Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples get better and be strong and be in community. And so the best way to do that is to keep pushing forward. And so most of the rehabs are never stagnant, always looking for how can we improve, what should we try next, and things change. You know, we've seen, especially in the last 4 years since COVID, things have changed so dramatically across the board in how we function in society, really. And so rehabs have to adapt as well, and just constantly things are changing, and yeah, reviewing and improving and trying things out. And, you know, Aaron, I'm sure you can speak to this, you know, sometimes things, you try things out, they don't work, sometimes they do, but it's taking those risks to always be improving. So that continuous improvement is really important. And there are evaluation, like formal evaluations that are undertaken. There's a load of formal evaluation processes like client feedback, surveys, quantitative data, qualitative data, talking to people, taking suggestions. So yeah, anything I missed there?
No, you got it.
And so we've just got 5 minutes left, so we can probably do a few questions if there are any.
Great.
A couple there. I tried to answer it, but I couldn't type in it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Aaron and Daniel, for that extremely informative and interesting presentation. It covered so many points. I love that, you know, that story that you told about the person that thought that they were a certain way, and through participating in the programs, they came to realize they didn't have to be that way. You know, that they didn't have to stick to the same old stories and same old roles. Through participating in the program. So that was wonderful. Okay, so I will read the couple of questions that we've got in the chat. It says, hello from an anonymous attendee. Are there any ADARRN services for WA? Thanks.
There is a service in Broome and I want to say Kununurra. They're not actually ADARRN members as yet. But there's not actually, that's the only 2 Aboriginal community controlled rehabs in WA. So WA doesn't have very many Aboriginal community controlled rehabs. Most of the rehabs are controlled by non-Indigenous organisations. There is one called Yadinya in Port Hedland, who is a non-Aboriginal community controlled rehab, who is an associate member of ADARRN. So they can't be a full member because they're not an Aboriginal community controlled rehab, but they are an associate member. So WA is a tricky one because for such a big land space, there's so few rehabs.
The second question there in the chat is, do you run workshops for other services?
Mm-hmm.
We can. Yeah, we do quite
yeah.
presentations. And it's just kind of, we're pretty I don't know the word, we just, if people ask, we try and accommodate, because working, it doesn't matter where the clients are. If we can help, we will help. And like I said before, often what works well for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples works well for all peoples.
I've been working here for about 8.5 years, and I don't think I've ever said no. It's always keen. You know, it's about collaboration, connection, communication. So yeah. Sorry, I didn't get to see Anonymous. Just reach out to the organisers, get their contact details, and yeah, let's yarn up.
Excellent. So we've got a few minutes for some more questions. While people are thinking and typing their questions in the Q&A panel there, I also have a question. I was really interested in what you were saying about like how families can be part of that healing process through the Glen. What are some examples of how families and loved ones have been involved while they've had, you know, family members or friends in the Glen going through the program?
So me, Danny, yeah. Some of the examples, we have community events and stuff on site where we invite the families in to be a part of that day. You know, we do a thing every few months called the Glen's Got Talent, where the guys all, you know, all learn a song or something like that, and kind of get to come and they'll perform it. They invite their families. We have various barbecues and things like that. But we also have, I mean, that's kind of the informal fun stuff, but we also have services and stakeholders that provide, you know, mediation and stuff like that, and you know, supervised and supported conversations between partners and family members for when they're returning, and obviously through our various referral partners up and down the coast and throughout Greater New South Wales. I'm speaking particularly for the Glen, of course, is that we've got a lot of places that once our fellows return back to community, that we engage them with the various kind of support services within that area and give them the information, collaborate, connect. Most of the time now we, thanks to Zoom, we're able to kind of set them up with a bit of a Zoom meeting before they return, so they're not kind of cold walking into a service when they return back there, because obviously there's that bit of a barrier there. So yeah, thanks to Zoom, you know, we've been able to kind of minimise that, you know, cold turn up when they get there. So things like that are kind of happen. And then obviously with the case by case basis that we've discussed, it all depends on what the requirement are of the individual and what their goal is related to around their family. So it's individualized treatment. Well, I could tell you all the different things we've done, but we've got 2 minutes to go.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Now I'm just looking at the question and answer panel. It doesn't look like there's any more that's come through. So with just
thanks,
2 minutes.
Val, for your feedback.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Have I missed anything in the chat? We're all good? Okay.
Do you cover the other rehabs that I want to really benefit from your service and our clients? Yes, Nicole, we do. Reach out.
Great.
Did I
Oh,
miss
they're in the
anything else?
chats. Yeah. Okay, thanks for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. Okay, well, I think we might wrap up there. Sadly, that's all we have time for. Please thank me, everyone, in for Aaron and Danny for the presentation, and thanks everyone for joining. Apologies to anyone who didn't have their question answered today. You're more than welcome to get in touch with us via email, and we'll respond to any questions or inquiries as soon as possible. Yeah, thank you for tuning in. We'll be holding more of these webinars and putting new resources on the Cracks in the Ice website throughout the year. So I'd encourage everyone to subscribe to our mailing list at cracksinttheice.org.au to receive future updates. Thank you once again, Danny and Aaron, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. Thanks for coming. Bye.